Clint Eastwood was Hollywood's fastest draw, but Dean Martin was more dangerous. His 0.20-second moment of pure charisma on the movie set silenced an entire crew and proved that some legends can't be manufactured, only born. It was March 15, 1968, and the dusty backlot of Paramount Studios had been transformed into the fictional town of Deadwood Creek for the filming of The Last Gunfighter, a big-budget western that was expected to cement Clint Eastwood's transition from television's rawhide to major motion picture stardom. Eastwood had spent months preparing for this role, working with dialogue coaches to perfect his laconic delivery, training with quick-draw experts to achieve lightning-fast gun handling, and developing the steely-eyed stare that would become his trademark. The studio had invested heavily in creating Eastwood as Hollywood's next great Western hero. The film's director, Robert Aldrich, was known for his ability to create masculine, hard-edged characters, and he had crafted The Last Gunfighter specifically to showcase Eastwood's emerging tough guy persona. Every scene was designed to emphasize Eastwood's controlled intensity and dangerous unpredictability. The cast and crew had been working together for 6 weeks, and they had developed a comfortable rhythm around Eastwood's methodical, professional approach to filmmaking. Eastwood was quiet, focused, and completely committed to maintaining the serious, intimidating atmosphere that his character required. Clint doesn't break character between takes. Assistant director Mike Nichols had explained to new crew members. He stays in that headspace all day. That's what makes him so effective. The morning of March 15th began like any other day of shooting. Eastwood arrived on set in his full Western costume, black hat, duster coat, and the signature poncho that had become associated with his television work. He moved with the deliberate, measured pace that had become his signature, every gesture calculated to project strength and danger. The scene being filmed that day was crucial to the movie's success, a confrontation in the town saloon where Eastwood's character would face down 3 adversaries in a climactic showdown. It was the kind of scene that required absolute concentration and perfect timing. "Places, everyone," director Aldrich called out. "This is the money shot. Clint, remember, you're the most dangerous man in this room. Everyone else is just waiting to die." Eastwood nodded grimly and took his position at the saloon bar, his hand resting casually near his holstered Colt .45. The extras playing the townspeople arranged themselves around the set, all of them focused on creating the tense atmosphere that the scene required. That's when Dean Martin walked onto the set. Dean hadn't been scheduled to appear that day. He was at Paramount filming pickups for a different picture, but he had heard through the studio grapevine that his old friend Robert Aldrich was directing a Western on the backlot. Dean strolled into the saloon set wearing his street clothes, a perfectly tailored casual suit, sunglasses, and his characteristic relaxed smile. He looked completely out of place among the dusty Western costumes and serious atmosphere that had been carefully cultivated for Eastwood's scene. "Hey, Bobby," Dean called out to director Aldrich with his typical casual warmth. "How's the cowboy business treating you?" The entire set came to a halt. Eastwood, who had been in deep character preparation, looked up in surprise. The crew, who had been focused on creating the perfect atmosphere for their star's big scene, suddenly found their attention completely diverted. "Dean," Aldrich responded with obvious pleasure. "What brings you to Deadwood Creek?" "I was in the neighborhood," Dean replied with his characteristic understated charm. "Thought I'd see how the other half lives." Dean's presence immediately changed the energy of the entire set. Where there had been tension and serious concentration, there was now an atmosphere of relaxed professionalism and genuine warmth. "Dean Martin," whispered one of the camera operators to his assistant. "Now there's a real movie star." Dean looked around the saloon set with obvious appreciation. "Nice setup, Bobby. Very authentic." Then his gaze settled on Clint Eastwood, who was still standing at the bar in full Western costume. "You must be Clint," Dean said, walking over to extend his hand. "I've heard great things about your work." Eastwood shook Dean's hand with the same measured intensity he brought to everything. "Mr. Martin, it's an honor. Please, call me Dean," Dean replied, with easy familiarity. "We're all just trying to make movies here." Director Aldrich saw an opportunity for some behind-the-scenes publicity. "Dean, would you mind if we shot a quick bit of you and Clint together, just for the studio's promotional materials?" Dean glanced at his watch. "Sure, Bobby. I've got a few minutes." What happened next would be talked about in Hollywood for decades. Aldrich positioned Dean and Eastwood at opposite ends of the saloon bar, creating a natural setup for what looked like a classic Western confrontation between two gunfighters. "Just look at each other," Aldrich instructed. "We'll shoot it like a face-off. Nothing fancy." The cameras rolled, and both men took their positions. Eastwood, in full costume and character, adopted his trademark steely-eyed stare, the look that had been carefully developed and practiced to project maximum intimidation and danger. Dean, still in his street clothes and sunglasses, simply stood there being himself. For exactly 0.20 seconds, the two men looked at each other across the saloon set. In that brief moment, something extraordinary happened that no one on the set had expected. Dean Martin, without changing his expression, without adopting any kind of character or persona, without doing anything except existing in his natural state, projected a screen presence so powerful and effortless that it made Clint Eastwood's carefully constructed tough guy image look like exactly what it was: a performance. The difference was instantaneous and shocking. Eastwood's stare, which had looked so menacing and dangerous moments before, suddenly seemed manufactured and overly theatrical when contrasted with Dean's natural, unforced charisma. Dean's presence wasn't based on trying to look tough or dangerous. It was based on an authentic confidence and comfort with himself that couldn't be taught, practiced, or imitated. He looked like someone who had never doubted his own worth or felt the need to prove anything to anyone. The 0.20 seconds ended when Aldrich called cut, but the impact on everyone who witnessed it lasted much longer. The entire film crew stood in complete silence, processing what they had just seen. "Jesus Christ," the cinematographer whispered to his camera operator. "Did you see that?" Dean just made Clint look like he was trying too hard. One of the grips observed quietly. Eastwood himself seemed to understand immediately what had happened. He looked at Dean with a new respect, the respect of a professional, recognizing the presence of a master. "That was something else," Eastwood said quietly to Dean. "How do you do that?" Dean looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Do what?" "That presence, that natural authority." "I've been working for months to develop the kind of screen presence you just showed in 2 seconds. Dean's response revealed both his natural humility and his understanding of what made him different from other performers. "Clint, you're a hell of an actor," Dean said sincerely. "But you're trying to be something you're not." "I'm not trying to be anything. I'm just being me." The conversation that followed became legendary in Hollywood circles, as Eastwood asked Dean about the difference between manufactured persona and authentic presence. "You're working so hard to look dangerous," Dean explained, "that you forget to just be confident. Real presence doesn't come from trying to intimidate people. It comes from being so comfortable with yourself that other people feel comfortable around you, even when they shouldn't." "But how do you develop that?" Eastwood asked. "You don't develop it," Dean replied. "You either have it or you don't. What you have is the ability to become someone else completely. That's acting. What I have is just me. Neither one is better than the other, but they're completely different things." The film crew, who had been listening to this conversation with fascination, began to understand that they were witnessing a master class in the difference between movie stardom and screen presence. Director Aldrich, who had worked with major stars throughout his career, later said that Dean's brief appearance had taught him more about screen charisma than 20 years in Hollywood. In 0.20 seconds, Dean showed everyone on that set what natural screen presence looks like. Aldrich reflected. Clint was performing the idea of being dangerous. Dean just was dangerous, in the most charming way possible. The footage of Dean and Eastwood's brief face-off was never used in any promotional materials, partly because it made Eastwood's carefully constructed image look artificial by comparison. But the film became legendary among industry insiders as an example of the difference between manufactured star power and authentic charisma. Word of the incident spread quickly through Hollywood's tight-knit community. Other directors began requesting Dean for similar brief appearances, hoping to capture some of that natural screen magic for their own films. "Every actor in Hollywood should study what Dean did in those 2 seconds, observed veteran casting director Marion Dougherty. "He didn't act like a movie star. He didn't try to project any particular image. He just stood there being Dean Martin. and that was more compelling than any performance. Eastwood, to his credit, learned from the experience and began to develop a more naturalistic approach to his screen persona. Instead of trying so hard to project danger, he began to focus on projecting quiet confidence, a change that would serve him well throughout his career. Dean taught me that the best screen presence comes from not trying to have screen presence, Eastwood said years later. He was so comfortable with who he was that it made everyone around him comfortable too, even when they were supposed to be intimidated. The 0.20-second moment became part of Hollywood folklore, studied by actors and directors who wanted to understand the difference between genuine charisma and theatrical presence. Dean's brief appearance on The Last Gunfighter set demonstrated that some qualities can't be taught, learned, or imitated. His natural screen presence was the result of decades of being genuinely comfortable with himself, both as a performer and as a person. Dean Martin didn't need to act tough, because he was tough, observed film critic Pauline Kael. Not physically tough, but emotionally tough. He was so secure in his own identity that he never needed to prove anything to anyone. The incident also highlighted the different paths that actors could take to achieve screen success. Eastwood's methodical, disciplined approach to developing his persona was just as valid as Dean's natural charisma, but they represented completely different philosophies of performance. Clint works incredibly hard to become the characters he plays. Noted acting coach Lee Strasberg, Dean doesn't become characters, he makes characters become him. The 0.20 seconds that Dean Martin spent looking at Clint Eastwood across a Western movie set became a defining moment in understanding what separates genuine movie stars from talented actors who play movie stars. Dean had proven that some forms of screen magic can't be manufactured, studied, or imitated. It can only be possessed by people who have spent their entire lives being completely comfortable with who they are. If this story of natural charisma versus manufactured presence moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who understands that authenticity is more powerful than any performance. Have you ever witnessed someone whose natural presence commanded a room without trying? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to check out our other videos about the moments when natural talent revealed itself in unexpected ways.